What up, guys? Hope you guys had a good fourth. What up?
Yo, yo, happy holidays.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. You been down to the Wookening yet?
No,
No,
no, I didn't make it.
no.
We went and saw a brass band last night at this jazz club that was fucking dope. And I had actually a buddy that I've never met in person, just I've talked with on Facebook for fucking 10 years that was driving through Vegas today and he stopped by and we fucking burned and talked for a while. That was cool.
Nice. Was there any like events going on around town today? Like We 420 weed shit?
Yeah, nothing that I really wanted to be involved with. I saw there was like a car show somewhere. I know a bunch of the dispensaries were having like concerts and shit.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's funny, man, because I saw somewhere that even San Francisco was dialing back this year. They usually had the big, sesh on Hippie Hill or whatever down in fucking San Francisco, and I think they cut that out this year. I know the
Really?
one in Denver over the last even while 14, 15, 16, they were starting to scale down the one in Denver. They got rid of the cups, and then they would still do the like 420 sesh. And then I think the last one of those that they did big was like Ludacris or something. There was some like not mid
Yeah.
tier rapper,
Oh,
but just
I think
like maybe
it
it was
was
Little Wayne,
Waka Flocka was there.
something like that. Yeah, and but they really, I think they tried to get away from doing that too. There's no money in it, man. It's all the liability and all the bullshit,
Right.
and it's not an event really. It's like a freebie one-off thing. So you got to figure out how to pay for it,
Yeah, exactly.
and the whole thing is just, I don't know. After they shut all the cups down on 420, the whole holiday wasn't fun anymore. It was like the cups were nice because if you didn't have to work, you could at least go do something fun and go
Right.
see people, go run into everybody, and everybody was in one place.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always cool when like the growers can get together, the hash makers can get together, and like people that are
Right.
like minded and it's not fucking custies and
Yeah, right.
a bunch
Yeah,
of random
right.
people thrown
Yeah.
together.
I was like saying, like, for so long, if you worked in the industry, this last week was probably your busiest week of the year. Because if you were doing sales or if you were doing, anything, you probably spent your week prepping product like a fucking animal.
Yeah, the,
And
I,
then by the time 420 rolls around, everybody just wants to go to the bar or just go
right.
chill and like not do weed shit.
Yeah, hell yeah. I'm glad I'm not on that side of it, man. I could,
Yeah.
I could
Yeah, I don't
imagine,
miss the customer side at all of any
I
of
couldn't
it.
imagine working in a fucking store today.
Mhm.
Whew.
No. And it's because I mean, it's another one of those that like the problem became with a lot of those cups that it became less people trying to buy shit and more just people that wanted free shit.
Oh
And
yeah.
they looked at it like, well, I paid $150 or whatever for this
What
ticket
are
to get in.
you gonna
So
give me?
that, yeah, what are you giving me for free? And some places would play into it. They would do like, little half packs of seeds or do small giveaway things that you could just
Right.
hand out.
Yeah.
But man, it was almost always an expense you had to eat to do those cups, unless by some chance you won, and then you could go home and market, and make some of that money back. But like, yeah, bro, like, oh shit, the fuck is that? Rosin?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
you got a
um.
little bit,
Oh, that's beautiful. Hell yeah.
a little bit from the homie Dr. Dank. This was
Nice.
this
This
wasn't
is
even the album.
this stuff is from the guys that were running the lab at Flower One. So it's the flower that I was growing in the greenhouse, the big ass greenhouse, and then they were doing cold water and pressing that shit.
Oh, so it wasn't the same company. They were just processing for you guys.
No, it was the same company. Yeah. But they shut down in December. Like
Oh,
the whole
okay,
thing
okay.
shut down. The greenhouse shut down, and they shut the lab down also. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
That was a first for me, man. Like I've heard a lot of why businesses fold in this industry, but just not paying your taxes. That was especially a big
yeah. So
company because
why
that's generally the one thing they all do. The one thing they all do is like, look, the one way they can still fuck you up is if you don't pay your fucking taxes. And so, that's always dispensaries that was at. That was the one person they paid the right money to
hell
was
yeah,
whoever handled the finances because they were the motherfucker that made sure all of the shit got done so they won't kick your door in. That's the one way. Even in a legal state, they'll still fuck you up pretty good. You don't pay
hell
your
yeah.
fucking taxes.
I believe they are coming for their money.
Yeah, that's what's so fucked is there's still 20 some states where it's not legal. It's still federally illegal, but the US government is the largest benefactor of legal weed by far, more than any single state because every state you still got to pay federal fucking
Yeah,
income tax. They're still making money on that weed.
yeah.
It's fucking crazy. It's
That
fucking crazy.
that company paid more in taxes per year than any of the casinos downtown, which is insane.
That's crazy, bro. But it's another one where like, yeah, I guarantee you, none of those casinos are paying percentage wise the same amount of money. It would put them out of business. You can't make money like that.
Yeah,
I mean, you're
no,
paying high 20s to 30% tax. That's a third of your business.
yeah, dude.
That's
There's
fucking
almost
crazy.
no profit.
Yeah, that's fucking crazy. Yeah, I keep telling people, man, I don't know
And
too
then
many.
people make all these posts and are bitching, which I agree with and understand about the low wages in the industry, but like, what are you gonna fucking do? Like no one is making fucking money in the industry right now. There is a very few people that are making any fucking money at all. And if you're
This
not,
is how I say it. I know nobody who got in the business broke and left the business rich. But I know a few people that got in the business rich and left the business slightly less
yeah,
rich.
not
They might have
broke.
still been rich, but they were slightly less rich at the end. Nobody's
Yeah,
cashing big $1 trillion checks off of weed but the government. That's
yeah.
it. That's it.
There was a meme going around that said you can become a millionaire in this industry if you're a billionaire already.
Yep. It's a great place to dump shitloads of money, but bro, here's what's so funny about it, right? And it's a thing we don't really admit all that often is that it's still in its infancy. Like
Yeah,
what it's finally going to look like when federal legalization happens is nothing like what it looks like right now.
no,
Every one of these companies today will take a buyout from Coca-Cola or from Budweiser or from whatever massive company it is tomorrow when it legalizes, when they come in the business.
for the most part, yep, for sure. And
I always say,
that money is fucking coming too.
oh yeah, yeah,
It's coming eventually.
yeah. It's one of those things, man, where like it's inevitable. I think the notion that you're going to keep capitalism out of weed is one of the silliest things ever. I think the best thing that we could do is to end up with something that looks like alcohol. The
Yeah,
taxes are reasonable. The
yeah.
product's easier to handle. It's easier to handle interstate commerce. You can sell this shit online if you want.
You
Like
don't
all
need to
of
be a
that.
fucking millionaire to go get a
Right.
license and open up
Right.
your own.
Right. Or even a situation where, if I want to run a microbrewery and I want to set up a small thing and I want to focus strictly on quality, that can happen and that can
Right,
sell.
right.
You know,
Yeah, but
right this minute,
it doesn't
that's
take
not the way it's set
arm and
up.
leg to get that shit started. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's funny, man. I see so many. There's so much that happens on the back end that I just have to kind of laugh at. When you watch some of these grows get built out, these people aren't smart about any of that. It's almost like how can I waste as much money on the startup and they don't ever think that that's just overhead you're going to
yeah,
carry. whether those are loans that you took out, whether they're investors, whatever that build out looked like,
Right.
that's overhead now, bro. That's money you got to drag. So when you start getting into, hey man, we got this crop and it's not looking all that good, that's where that decision of, look, it's product, we got to sell it because we got to make our ends,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just one of those things that, like, I don't talk to a lot of people at the heads of these companies that have 10-year plans.
Yeah. No.
Most of them are not planning 5 and 10 years out. The goal is make it look as big as you possibly can,
With the
drag it as
cheapest
far as
equipment
you
that you
can,
can in there.
get it in front of some venture capitalist guys who are willing to invest that don't know the
Yeah.
business, you know?
And it's funny, I went to a grow yesterday actually because I was looking at this fertigation machine. It's called the Paragon. It's made by this company here in town called Eden Water Technologies, but they use peristaltic injector pumps, and they built this contained fertigation system. It's literally like uh, 6 feet by 3 feet wide and like 4 feet tall, probably. That's it. Has all the injectors contained inside there. It's got a huge fucking computer screen on the front of it so you can run all your programs and program the entire thing. But the peristaltic pumps that it uses are the same ones that Revlon uses to fill their fucking makeup kits. So they're like accurate down to 0.01 of a milliliter or some
That's
shit
all.
like that. Might be zero point
Yeah.
0.1 milliliter, but it's fucking insane. And they can send multiple recipes through one pipe header. So they run one pipe from the machine all the way, and then it splits to go off to your separate rooms or whatever. But you don't have to run 30 fucking pipes from your fertigation room all the way out to the rooms,
Yeah.
and you don't need fucking batch tanks either. So this machine is like 120 grand with, with the piping and the installation and shit. But you look at other competitors that are like 35 grand, but the injectors aren't as accurate. You need the batch tanks. If you don't use batch tanks, you're going to need a dump valve at the end of your room, like basically
Right.
just running to a drain so that you can dump for 30 seconds or a minute or whatever to flush out that line that has nutrients in it.
Right.
And you start doing the math on that shit, and 120 grand up front, in 3 to 5 years, that shit is paid for, and now you're saving money,
Yeah. Right.
a lot of money on nutrients that you're not dumping down the drain, the labor to fucking mix
How,
your tank or whatever it is.
how easy is
And
it to clean?
oh, it's so easy.
So that's the
So
biggest thing with, like, large scale fertigation, especially when you're using salt. And I've seen some, I would say medium quality systems. I saw one in a massive system at Native Roots that was fairly impressive, but still, for the amount of complexity that went into
right,
it, there's so many parts that can go, there's so many parts and so many places where something can
yeah,
go wrong.
yeah,
And then when you're feeding salt, if you're not super careful, it's super easy to have a whole table not getting the proper feed.
oh
It's
yeah,
so easy for shit to get, emitters to get clogged, for shit to get super thick and super heavy. And, like, it's one thing if you're somebody who cares, you care about your system, you care every run, you're running clean afterwards and running flush afterwards and getting everything done. But when you're in a cycle where you might not have a damn day off and you're just like, look, we got to get the next one in here, it's got to go.
right,
There's a lot of that stuff that can really build up, and you can end up with everything from plants that don't want to feed at all to emitters that don't work to just lines that are clogged. So it's, there's so many working parts, but God,
yeah,
does it make life so much easier.
for sure. And that the cool thing about this machine is on all of your recipes and all of your programs, you can program flushes before and after. So
That's
uh,
sick.
you
That's
can
sick.
you can shut off the valves to the rooms and just run a Sanidate or whatever, you know uh,
Yeah.
acid flush out the
Oh, it's so
line.
So
clean
I
those.
see what you're saying. Now I'm putting it together in my head what you're saying, but you don't need a mix tank. So you essentially just keep all of the liquids like in one place and it mixes them online. Like it mixes them in the, that's awesome. That's dope.
So
That's
you
dope.
just have like your
Right,
totes. So
right,
like I'm using powders, so I would have a stock tank where I mix my powders at a super concentrated level,
right,
and then I have my injector set at whatever milliliter I'm trying to inject at. It injects it. It has like a mixing tank or whatever in the
right.
line, mixes that, and then sends it right to the rooms. But with most injection systems, with the the way they inject, either with water going through a venturi or with the diaphragm pumps, when
Right.
your pump kicks on, it takes 20, maybe at the slowest like 15 seconds, but some of those machines take up to a minute to get up to their pressurization, and then they're
Right,
injecting at the right
right,
levels. So
right.
you're doing a direct inject and trying to crop steer and do micro dosing. If it takes it 30 seconds to get up to what you're trying to send, and you're only sending a 30-second feed, like you're not giving the plants what you're trying to give them. So that's why most people use batch tanks with those systems, because you're sending 600 gallons to this batch tank. So the first 30 seconds being off by a couple points doesn't really fucking matter, because
Well,
after
you
you
have,
get
I
those,
would imagine you have less waste too that way because at the end of the day, you're only preparing what you need, so you don't end up with like a third of a tank at the end when you feel like everything's done. It's
yeah,
only using it as you need,
yes,
and you're not prepping a whole tank that's now got to sit there and either be mixed until your next
right,
feed or got to go to a different. It just you never end up with an
yep.
end. You'll always have just what you need. I mean, that's definitely perfect, man. But let me ask you, do you like? The starting with the powders? Like, do you like starting with a powder base, or is that just obviously the cheapest option?
It's the cheapest and it's the easiest. I don't. We can't pay for water at the scale that we're doing.
Oh, I
I
got
would.
you.
There's nothing. There's not a liquid nutrient. I don't think that I would really
Right, right,
run.
right,
Some of the
right.
like the microbes that I run are in liquid form.
Oh, I got you. I got you. So
I do like humic and kelp and shit.
that's good.
But
That's good.
honestly, those come powdered, and then we mix them into a stock tank as well.
Yeah,
So
that's dope.
yeah,
That's dope. Bro, the only reason I asked was because one of the worst, it's one of those where, it's 50-50. Like, it was the first time I had ever run like a powder setup. It was somebody who was doing it on their own, to be fair. It wasn't some big ag product or something that I was getting from a super trusted source. But I was working in a grow at the time that was running this setup and it looked great there. And I ran it myself, and it was the most disappointing resin I had ever run in my life. Like
yeah,
there were plants that I just like wanted to throw out because there was no resin. And the stuff I usually work with, man, if I got something where there's the shit's got no resin on it, something's
yeah.
wrong. But it was one of those where I was
I,
trying to be super cheap. I had a batch of powder and I was like, I'm just going to put it together. I don't think I did my usual additives that I do, like stuff like kelp and bacterials and shit like that.
that shit's super important, and from what I'm seeing, uh stronger micronutrient ratio is the most important thing.
Are you
Everything has fucking
trying to sell me
NPK.
more CalMag, dog? Is that where this is going?
Yeah, of course. No, but like the sulfur, the iron, the manganese, like the if those ratios are not there, then you're not getting your taste, you're not
Right,
getting your flavor, you're not getting your resin production.
right.
uh, yeah, and the so a lot of the salt based nutrients are the same, almost exactly the same on mpk ratios, but then the cheaper you get, the less of the micronutrients are in there also, like the your jacks and your peters and stuff like that.
Do
And
you have do you have a different feed for flour, or are you just using one base feed the whole time?
um, I use Front Row. They have this new product that's called Component Plus that I use. I started using at the greenhouse just because of the ease of it. It's one bag, and then I add calcium nitrate to make my veg mix. So it's just the component plus and calcium nitrate.
Is
And then for
component
flour,
plus a PK of some sort? Well,
uh, a
I'm not
little,
familiar with that product.
a little bit.
Oh
It's
my god!
I think like a 21620 or
Oh, but it's
something
not.
like that.
It's not like a heavy potassium phosphorus.
No, the MPK is.
Oh, I got you. I got you. I
So
got you.
that's what I add
I
in
got.
flour for for the flour recipe. So it's just the component plus the cal nitrate and then the MPK in flour. And that's what the MPK has more of the phosphorus and potassium.
I got you. But
Um,
you do have essentially have a bloom booster of some sort you run during flower.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I
Awesome, man.
run the same EC veg through flour. It's all 2.5.
You still have HPSs
We, we do
for
in the green
supplemental?
we do in the greenhouse right now. Yeah,
Oh, you
we
have
have a
indoor as
couple.
well?
What?
You have indoor as well? Or
No, the
just the
greenhouse.
greenhouse?
The new greenhouse that I'm in is mixed light.
Oh,
So
I got you. I got you.
we have six houses. One veg. The veg room has double-ended metal halide, and then three of the flower houses have double-ended HPS, and two have some Chinese LED light company that I haven't heard of.
Yeah, cheap. Man, it's
Yeah.
like that's we talk about a lot of waste and we talk about the industry and how wasteful huge chunks of it are, not the least of which being things like packaging and just the general production. But when you look at the number of spare HPS lights that were floating around Denver between 2014 and
Yep.
2020, 2022, and I say that because I think now it's gotten to the point where most people know they can't get rid of them. So I got a good feeling
They
a lot of
give
those
them away.
ballasts ended up in the metal chop shop and ended up in the scrap metal heap.
Yep.
But bro, everybody from those years, it went from like 20, it went from 4 foot hoods to like everything's LED. And it's like all of these grows, not all of them have done it yet, but I think it's happening for most grows. Just when you look at the sheer amount of power saved on a commercial level, it's unreal. Like when
The
you look at a facility.
rebates they get back make the lights almost fucking free.
Right. Right. Yeah, especially when you're talking about what's probably millions of dollars up front of light, but then you look at the power savings on even a medium-sized commercial grow. Forget a 140,000 square foot indoor warehouse. You look at some of those facilities that I saw in Denver, the native roots grow, they had to have extra power lines brought into the facility to this from the street because they just needed so much sheer power, and this was all running HPS. So it's like, all of these grows now that are turning over to LED. I mean, there was already so many lamps in Denver just sitting in warehouses from grows that went out of business, and they just get pushed onto the street or onto the black market, onto Craigslist
Yeah.
or whatever. But now forget that most of those are now completely obsolete, that in a
Yeah.
couple years, nobody, I think, will be running HPS
Yeah.
anything. And I never thought I would say that a day in my life.
I
I've been
didn't
watching,
either, but the
I've been
LED
watching
game
LED,
really
I've been
fucking
watching
stepped
it
up.
develop. Yeah, I've been watching it develop for 30 years, and I never thought it would get to that point.
Yeah. And that's what I've been telling the people that I'm working for now is because they have these LEDs that they got in probably 2020, and they're definitely like a super cheap brand. But how much LEDs have changed just since 2020 is fucking ridiculous. Like
Yeah.
there's yeah, those lights are completely outdated
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. It's so funny because, a lot of us bemoaned the change from like analog ballast to digital ballast when we were dealing with HPSs, right?
Right?
Because that was the point where you couldn't just fix it, pop it open, and put a part in it. The moment it had a circuit board in it, it didn't play like an analog lamp, an analog ballast. Well, now it's even worse because usually with most of these cheap Chinese boards, once one piece of it goes out, the whole board goes out, and there's this shit all you can do unless you're really a next
Unless
level
you're an
tech
engineer.
savvy, you know.
Yeah.
Your average, tinkering with things guy's not going to pop one of them LEDs and just fix it.
Yeah.
It's usually a little tougher, but like you said in a commercial grow, your power savings from 5 years ago are so stark. You could afford to replace every lamp in the fucking thing every 4 years and still be making savings on what you would pay for HPS lamps.
For
That's
sure.
crazy.
Yeah, it's
That's
insane.
crazy.
Yep.
But I told
And
somebody the other
honestly,
day.
the
Okay.
quality of the weed is fucking better, man.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
arguably.
hands
The
down
more they tune
better.
the spectrum, the more they get that light to look more like sunlight, the better it's going to be.
Yep.
And now most of the LEDs have a UV of some situation, and we all know that's the trick to resin production, man. Increasing
For sure.
UVs is generally the trick to resin production.
Yep. Yeah, I'm talking to a company, and hopefully we'll end up getting some of their lights, but they'll put sensors in the room, so when the sun's out and I don't need them, the lights basically dim or turn off, and then as the sun in the winter months when I need the lights more on the inside,
Yeah,
they're giving their full uh, intensity onto the plants. Um, but they also do UVB, so it's almost mimicking the sun. It's
right.
obviously not the same thing, but they're getting pretty fucking close.
Have you seen any benefit to like fading lights on or fading them on in sequence versus everything just pops on? I mean, aside from the obvious power draw. I mean, like, because I worked in a facility where they had that tuned to an absolute degree, so they faded on over an hour or so and
Right.
off in the evenings. It wasn't all just off; it was, still a fade.
I've
But yeah, I don't know if I've seen enough to really justify
I've never
past the power.
I've never done side by sides, but in the greenhouse, I wake I wake shit up pretty slow. The lights come on in their zones, so they're not coming on all at one time, and
Yeah,
then the blackout curtain pulls slowly. That shit opens over 30 minutes, so it's not just straight open. And then our shade curtain stays pulled for about 45 minutes after the blackout is open and the lights are on. And then our shade curtain pulls, and by that time the sun is up, so the lights can dim at that point if they need to, or they'll stay on if it's a cloudy day. Um, but I haven't done anything side by side to see
right,
if there's really any
right.
difference in
I
waking them up slowly or just blasting them.
so like the only time that so far, like my experience, as far as Vegas weed, was soon after they went legal. We came out and it was right after the shooting at the concert,
Yeah, yeah,
and within 6 months we got super dirt cheap tickets for like Thanksgiving. Nobody wanted to go, and
yeah,
so I think we paid like $200 for rooms at the MGM or something, and
yeah.
on Thanksgiving Day. And I'm trying to remember what the name of the place we went to. It was something like nautical, like shore, or it was something. It was a huge company, and it was Reef. That's what it was. It was Reef, and
They
so it
just
was one of those
they
where
just shut down.
like as a brand entirely.
I think maybe just the cultivation, but yeah, because
Wow.
they were renting that building, and the whole roof has to be replaced.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
So yeah, this was, and we essentially, it was one I think where I had done some research, but then I think we hopped in a cab and just told the cabbie like, hey, if you take people to the weed shop, what's the biggest weed shop? And he was like, I got you, and he took us there. It was kind of weird. I mean, nothing that I had never seen before, but it
that was
was they.
that was
I
that was
want to say,
Dan Bilzerian's company.
oh really? Because I want to say they were using the Jungle Boys name pretty heavily.
Yeah,
um, but nothing. So it was all prepackaged. Everything was like under a counter, so you couldn't see physically any product in front of you. It
Right.
was all everything was like in under glass. Um, at some point, I think we broke down and bought something just so we could take something home, and it just wasn't. It wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, once again,
I
we have pretty high standards for dispos, but like it still wasn't.
I came out here in 2018, which is probably right around that time
Probably right
I'm
then.
talking
Yeah,
about. It was right before I stopped working at Mayflower, actually. Um,
yeah, that would have been
and
18-ish.
yeah, and we went to a dispensary, and it was the same thing. Like, you couldn't see any of the weed before you got it. They just
Yeah.
had like the package and the fucking name or whatever. And I was really unimpressed. But now there's some fucking fire in Las Vegas, man. There's some really good growers here. Um, Stackhouse, Nevada is putting out some absolute flame. That's that indoor place that I was working for a couple of months. Um, they have those the VFUs that I was telling you about, the little pods that they're growing
Oh,
in. Um,
yeah, 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 yeah.
they're a pain in the fucking ass, but they're putting some fire out of those little things. And like Green Life Productions is doing no-till indoors. They're on like their 38th cycle of living soil, and they have 3 rooms that they rotate harvests in. They're fucking crushing. Um,
What's the
this place,
situation with like public consumption shit?
they're just starting to open. There's a couple of lounges here now. I actually went to one a few weeks ago. Um, it was cool, but so you can get almost anything. They had like pre-rolled joints, infused joints. You could buy an eighth or a gram, a flower. They would bring out they had pretty nice bongs. They were made out of fucking metal, but it was just a straight tube bong. They would bring that out to you. You could get a bowl if you wanted that was clean. Um, and then you could buy hash. But you couldn't buy it by the gram. You could only buy a dab at a time.
Right.
So they literally brought you out a full fucking package, like what they would give you a gram of fucking rosin or something in, and it has a tiny little dab inside it. And then they had what are those?
Wow. Talk about wasteful packaging.
Yeah, dude, horrible.
Holy
And they
shit.
had what are those things? It's like the straw that heats up on the end.
Oh, nectar collector.
Yeah, the nectar collectors. And
Yeah.
so they bring out a nectar collector, and then you could order. I think it. I think you can order a quarter of hash a day, but you can only order it one
A
dab at a
dab
time.
at a time.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So did you ever go to the Lazy Lion in the Springs?
No.
Oh,
I heard about that.
bro.
I heard that place.
So when I first moved to Denver or to Colorado in 14, I lived in the Springs for a year before I moved to Denver.
Oh shit.
Um, and it was really because I didn't really know the area that well. It was just how it worked out at the time. And so the first place I found, I had a buddy mention the Lazy Lion and took me in. And it was unreal, first of all, especially now what I know about weed
Right.
and weed legalities and everything. It was unreal. But like I took my folks, like I took my mom. My mom was dumbfounded. So like for those that
Oh
don't know,
shit.
for a small period of time there was an absolute weed speakeasy in Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
When you walked in the door, there was probably $1 million worth of high-end glass in cases.
Forgot about
You
that
showed
place.
your ID, you signed a little piece of paper, and essentially you go back, and it was like a little lounge, um, except you could buy. Well, see, at this point in time, and I don't know if this has changed because I still don't think the Springs has rec. I may be wrong, but the last I heard, they were still only medical
Really?
not too terribly long ago. Yeah, the whole time I was there, the Springs was only medical. So this was like a real deal, low key underground. Like if you knew about it, you could get in. It seemed pretty open, like it was, an open secret amongst people
Yeah.
that knew. But if you didn't have a med card and you didn't want to drive to Denver, this was your
Right.
option. But you could buy pretty much just walk in and it would just be cases filled with slabs. You got to remember 2014, there was no sugar. Sugar
Right.
was a secondary product at this point. If it didn't shatter, people didn't want it. But
Nope.
these guys had like cup quality shatter. And it was just slabs. They had a section with flour. And I'm not shitting you. They had some of the best homemade edibles that I ever had. Their cheesecake, like we split a piece between three of us. It was the most delicious edible, but it was all like legit homemade type shit, like commercial quality. But
Right.
it was, it was all bootleg and it was all backdoor. But
That's,
boy, when you talk about like low key, like smoking pot, I will be honest, the crowd there was kind of fucking weird. It had kind of a juggalo, a little bit of like
that's what I heard.
juggalo, like lean. The people that hung out there were generally people that didn't have a place to go smoke otherwise.
Right.
So that you'd have a couple homeless people just kind of kicking it from time to time. There'd be a couple sitting in the corner smoking a joint, but it wasn't like a place you really sat and smoked. Now they had shit like that and video games and like all kinds of little stuff, but it always felt weird to me. Like we would always get it and go and then just go home and dab off the email or whatever. But you could do dabs. Like their whole thing. I said it's so funny because there's 2 or 3 people that I still talk to today that were fucking that I knew from the Lazy Lion that worked there, and they were the bud tender we liked, which was this kid named Manny, and then the bud tender that we thought hated everybody, which was a dude named Mickey that used to have necktie. He ended up being concentrated genetics or something like that.
Oh, shit.
And bro, it was so funny because we would go in and you'd have to do a dab because you're there. Like you're like, well, look, I'm gonna get a half gram or a gram. Just go ahead and throw me a dab so I'm high on the ride home, whatever. And but it was a real deal speakeasy, and the point where like they didn't have that sort of shit,
Yeah, no. They still don't.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
still
It's
haven't
still
got their shit together on the fucking lounges or
what's
there's no
bad is it's another one of those things that you should be able to just buy it at a fucking bar. It shouldn't be a whole fucking deal. If I'm at a fucking bar and you'll sell me a fucking shot, you should be able to sell me a fucking joint just as easily, And it's like that will happen one day, and that's why I say there's so much bullshit. You can't even in most states, you can't even have booze and weed sold under the same spot.
Yeah. No,
You know
not
what
at
I'm
all.
saying?
Yep. That shit's fucking dumb.
Yeah, and it's like that alone is just dumb as fuck because if you're ever, let's be honest, if you're ever going to have a place that doesn't feel like just a weird juggalo couch party, it's going to be a place where you can actually buy a drink, sit and have a joint, whether you want to drink or not. To be able to sit in a place where you can do both is nice for adults. I mean, Jesus Christ, man, we're all adults here.
I think
You should
be
able to have
the closest that I've heard of is that spot in down in Glendale. You remember the mayor that owned Shotgun Willie's, and then he had the dispensary that was in the same parking lot?
That was creepy weird, too.
Yeah, so you could go to the dispensary and buy if you bought an eighth, they would give you a free mug, and you could go across or go into the fucking strip club and get a beer for like $1 or whatever.
They also, if I'm not mistaken, in the same parking lot had one of the largest sex shops in the city.
Yeah.
It was super weird. It was like strip club. Well, within 3 or 4 blocks there too were the only strip clubs I remember seeing in Denver because there was also like a Hustler Club or something right over there in Cherry Creek.
Yep.
But it was super weird because it was the mayor, it was a strip club and a bar and a dispensary, but all in like separate buildings on the same property.
Yeah.
And that is probably as bizarre as it gets, at least in the world of legalization.
I never went to any of them, but that shit always blew my mind that it fucking existed.
I had a buddy that shopped at the Dispo, and it wasn't good.
Really? Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never heard anything good about it.
It was one of those. Yeah, they had the weirdest thing too was always their sign for the strip club was a gun with a limp barrel,
Yeah.
and it was like that doesn't scream strip club. That
Yeah,
screams like
right.
Wile E. Coyote's got a limp one.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah.
don't
I don't
or
want to go here.
Elmer Fudd. Like it was this Elmer Fudd rifle with just a limp. It was so weird. But yeah, like I said, it was 2 blocks from like there was 2 or 3 strip clubs that we would pass on the way because when I worked over off Evans at a hash spot, we would cruise over like to Kind Love and shit like that, and
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of in that whole little area, and then just go sit and smoke somewhere.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean that's one of those weird things that like all of the good ideas for being able to get people to gather and to just relax and have fun, music venues, a proper bar, like things like that, there's still nowhere that has that covered in the regulations.
Yeah, no.
There's so much like you have to license it so differently than anything else. Like even alcohol isn't licensed the same way that a dispensary is
Yeah,
licensed.
no, it's
Like
fucked up.
it's just not. And you can do certain things. Like I said, if I run a brewery, if I run my own brewery, we make beer. And I want to have an employee party, and I want to have all my employees to a restaurant and provide 2 kegs of beer. All I got to do is take them out of my
Yep.
inventory. That didn't exist at all for years in the Colorado
Yeah,
system. I
yeah,
want to say at some point they changed something so that you can technically
yeah.
give away
I
or
think they can.
gift product to employees or something like that.
Yeah, we have pass through here in Nevada, so we can do. They're
Like
called test.
fluid, you have to go to a point of sale and then you can pick it up at a point of sale.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, we had a couple places in Denver when Tiff worked at some hash places that they would do stuff like that. They would do, I
I could
think at one
always
point
get
they
it
had like
for a
a,
fucking penny in Denver
yeah,
anytime.
yeah,
Like when
yeah,
I worked for
yeah,
True Cannabis, I could go to the
yep,
store and I could every day I could get like 2 half-eighths for a fucking penny or some shit
yeah,
like that.
yeah. Yeah. That changed because that wasn't like that up
Yeah,
until maybe 18 or so. Like
right.
for the longest time, it was like a wink and a nod type of thing. And like,
Yeah.
we all left with product.
Oh yeah.
You'd have a boss that's like, here's a couple grams like on the side. It was always weird because you knew like shit, man, for those first few years, it was super anal because they were super strict on places. They were super on that tax money and they were super like
Yeah.
regulations because they wanted it to look valid. They wanted it to
We're
be
not
legit.
used to that shit.
No,
I
no. And it's
remember
funny because
the
people
first
were
place I
smoking.
yeah, the first place I worked was up in Greeley and we had a fucking shipping container in the parking lot and that's where we would all go smoke. Like there was a couch in there and shit and like if you watch the video cameras, like every half hour people were walking back and forth from the road to the shipping container and they'd be in there for like 10 minutes and then go back to fucking work.
So let me tell you my shipping container story because I got a funny shipping container story. So the first place I worked at was essentially overlooking Supermax Prison. What is that? It's not Henderson. I got a homie that lives out there now. I'll think of it in a minute. Anyway, it's down south, like literally on the side of a mountain, and you could
Right.
see off in the distance, you could see Supermax Prison. And so it was an outdoor grow, and they were literally just putting the plants in holes in the ground on a mountainside. So
Yep.
every year when it would melt, all of that salt and nasty shit. This was not prime soil. They were not amending it. Nothing. So story was the crop before I got there was actually nice, but all I watched them do was kill plants. Like it was a murder scene every day. So when I started, I was working on the trim crew, and I think it was a Craigslist job I'd picked up because I didn't have, any connects or anything, and so
Yep.
super shady. We end up on this way out, like murder row, out in the middle of nowhere, and we get to the trim trailer, and the trim trailer is like elevated a little bit, and I come to find out it's essentially two trailers stacked. So there's a trailer underground, and then there's the trailer that we're trimming in on
Okay.
top of it, right?
Okay.
The one on the ground was buried in the
Yeah.
ground, and that's where they were keeping the weed. So the harvest from the year before was essentially one of these trailers full, buried in the ground. So about midway through that season, this is 14, I get a job running a trim crew at a different location. So we have to do a transfer. And back then you could only do one transfer, like a med direct transfer, because it was a new thing, but it was a new life, something like that, or something
Yeah.
that was some weird. So we ended up filling a U-Haul with blue bins out of this trailer. And it was the funniest thing ever because it felt like a Cheech and Chong skit, because you know this shouldn't be happening. Even in a legal state, you're still in the back of your head going, this don't feel right, man. We're one step away from felonies in 40 states. Like, no, we're not.
Yeah.
And so we finally get into the trailer, into the one that's buried, to pull bins to fill the truck, right? It's exactly what you would think
Mold
of a
city.
train car buried in the ground. It was mold. It was just whole bins that had just turned. It was, and I ended up having to then trim it. And, I was we're throwing it away. If it's got mold in it, it's throwing it away.
Yeah.
And there were times when we'd pop bins, and we filled a room with all the bins. Once it was out of the U-Haul, we got it to the grow spot or to the trim spot, and it was just stacked with bins full of like the last year's weed. But boy, it was sad. It was sad. It was sad.
That's horrible.
It was exactly what you'd expect. But it's like, the funny thing is, people who've never grown weed don't think about shit like that.
Yeah, no,
I mean,
that's
I
a
don't
good
know that
idea.
anybody here had experience enough to know you're just begging for mold. Like, it's all going to be moldy eventually.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do to save that.
And what was sadder, that was sad. The crop that was happening while I was there. So I got that 6 months later, and I would get whole plants with grams on them. We would have whole plants that somebody had to tag, somebody had to metric, somebody had to deal with, that had grams on them. I didn't keep that job after that because I knew what was coming down the pike at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew, if I'm seeing stuff like this, this is going to be a bad year.
Yeah.
This is what harvest looks like. This is a bad time. And so, I got the fuck out of there, man. But Florence. It was down in Florence by Supermax. And there's nothing down there. It is hella deliverance. It's the American Southwest. So it's rattlesnakes, tumbleweeds, cactuses. It's really people that want to be off the grid, like legit.
Don't want to be found.
Yeah, you don't go down to South Colorado because you're just a healthy, loving people, love to be around people kind of guy. It's a lot of like, I want to be away from everybody. I don't want to have neighbors. I want to do what I want. I don't give a fuck. Coyotes, a lot of coyotes.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me because the motherfuckers are mangy as shit. Like, you hear coyotes and you're like, holy shit, that sounds scary.
Oh, yeah.
And them motherfuckers are scrawny and like look like they're not eating and they are hungry.
Hell yeah.
Fuck you up. But fuck, man. Yeah. But I will tell you, my time working weed in South Colorado was nothing if not interesting. Yeah. I mean, I had a grow in Pueblo West the trim that I'd taken, that where we moved the weed to, was in Pueblo West. Pueblo West is like literally a Walmart, a Little Caesars, and a bank in the middle of the desert. That's it. That's it. There's nothing else out there. I don't know why we had a weed shop, because there weren't enough people to justify it. We nearly got robbed. Like, this is right before you could carry guns in grows and have like proper security.
Right.
And we were trimming a night shift. So we would start at like 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock or something and trim until 2 in the morning. And so one of the nights we go on break, and we go to open the door. We did have a security guy. He just wasn't armed. None of us were armed. And we're in the middle of nowhere, bro. Like we're in like literally pull up with a car and just leave with what you want type of stuff.
Right.
And we go to open the door, and the security guy like shuts the door and is like, "Stay, just stay. Don't come out until I tell you to." And we're like, "Okay, whatever."
Right.
So we sit tight for a little bit. He kind of gives us the knock, comes and opens the door. This group was casing the place out. They were going to rob us on our break. They were straight up going to rob us on our break and pull in and fucking block our way out and rob us, put us back in the building and take
Hell
everything.
yeah.
They literally got ran off by our security guy, went to the next grow. There was another grow right down the way, took the motherfuckers hostage, tied them up, robbed the place that night. Literally left us to go rob another place.
That's so sketchy.
Yeah.
Fuck
And
that.
like I said, that was the
And
real
that was
Wild West of those like
that's
early
what I was
legalization
about to
days.
say. Yeah, that shit was crazy back then.
When you couldn't have
Colorado
a gun
really
in the
was the
grow.
wild, wild west. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, it's the true American Southwest, bro. It's rattlesnakes and fucking tumbleweeds and shit. People don't understand. Like Colorado is one of those weird states. It's got a little bit of everything.
Yep.
Like the climate in Denver is not the climate in, a couple miles north or a couple miles south. And you get into the mountains and it just gets crazier and weirder. And it's a beautiful, beautiful state as long as you stay near a
Yeah,
highway.
yeah,
Because the
man.
further you get from them highways, boy, it gets
Oh,
strange times.
weird, bro. Real
Yeah,
weird.
yeah. And like I said, man, a lot of people up there growing weed,
And
a lot of people just keeping their head down and just running that trap
yep,
life. And I met a lot of cool people up there. A
for
lot of
sure.
people in the mountains, but they're the type of people that like if they don't want people around, they're not real happy to see people at all.
Yeah, you don't wander up those driveways.
Yeah. Well, what was funny, last story, I remember when we first started looking at houses around Denver, we took a couple of trips up in the hills to go look at little places, just curious. And we pulled into one that was snowing, and I get about a third of the way up the driveway, and we start going backwards. And I just said, "Nah, bro, that's not. This happens enough here where this whole situation would be just like this hundreds of days of the year,
Yep.
and I ain't doing it. I ain't fucking doing it. I don't give a fuck. I'm not that brave. I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
I'm the city kid. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
No,
Same.
no, no.
When I first moved out there, before we even moved to Greeley, we wanted to live in Boulder, and it was way too expensive for us. But we found some house out in Left Hand Canyon. So if you go just north of Boulder and take a left into the mountains, it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like 15 minutes up there, and it
Beautiful.
was literally like a shack. It didn't even have electricity. It ran off of solar, and we were just like,
Yeah, no.
no, this is not gonna
Not that
work.
brave. No,
Nah,
because you got to keep so many, especially if you run a grow, you've got to keep so many supplies because you've got to be ready for when everything hits the fan, not if.
hell yeah.
The
Yep.
power's going to go out, the heat's going to go out, your plants are going to struggle. Like it's a real thing. And when people live in the backcountry like that, man, it's a whole lifestyle, but it's a whole
Yeah, man.
like you got to be resilient. You got to have everything you need, and you got to be ready to do a couple of days if you got no power, no water, no heat.
Yeah,
Bro,
especially in those winters, man. Woo.
the first week I showed up in Denver, I was staying. This is so funny because you're gonna know who I'm talking about too. I was staying with a friend who's a drummer for a large jam band, who was also from the South where I'm from. We're not friends anymore, but at the time I was staying with him trying to help him with a grow situation he had. And so I show up and I'm dumb. I'm from the South, I'm a fucking idiot. And we have like what's about to be a week of -12. And I know it's coming. We see it on the news. Everybody's talking about be careful and this, that, or the other. So I tell him, I'm like, hey man, I'm just a dumb redneck. We should leave the water running tonight because the pipes are going to freeze if you don't. And he's like, nah, man, what the fuck are you talking about? Man, this is Colorado. The pipes here are insulated. Like, are you fucking retarded? I said, look, man, it doesn't really take much. You just leave the water running. It's not like it's going to cost you anything. You
Right.
just leave it dripping. And then Worst case scenario, we have
Nothing
water
happens.
tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
Well, we didn't leave the water running. When we went a week in -12 without water with a 75 plant grow.
No.
Welcome to Denver. Fuck the disco biscuits. I'll just say that.
That's
God damn,
hilarious.
man. And it was just another one of those where, like, that's the kind of life. Like, we were in like Centennial on like a multi-million-dollar horse plantation neighborhood of like every house had a horse stable, and it was, probably one of those $4,000 chapel lot situations that he was into. And it was,
Yep.
bro, it was fucking crazy, but it was just, it's the kind of thing that like you don't think about it, and now you got to grow, and it's freezing, and it's freezing for a week. We got no water, bro.
That's a shitty
Anyway,
situation.
yeah, let's wrap this shit up, man. So look, it's still 420. We're gonna run the 420 sale through tomorrow. So if you haven't yet, there's still time. Go get on the 420 sale. www.terpfiend.com, terpfi3nd.com,
Fire,
and we still got mystery bags. What's that?
fire genetics.
Fires in the thank you, man. I'm gonna get you some gear soon. But yeah, man, we still have mystery bags. Yeah, just having a good time on 420. I hope everybody had a great weekend. I hope everybody stayed safe and stayed high. And man, keep the cow mag coming, guys. Peace.